For many years, when I was a young advocate, I was a neighbour to St. Columba's when I lived across the road in Lady Stairs Close, but I do have a closer connection with the Free Church of Scotland than that. My wife Susan's great-grandfather was the Reverend John Buchan, a minister of the Free Church. He had turned away from becoming a lawyer and instead became a minister of the gospel. In doing so, he had been influenced by Helen Chalmers, the daughter of the Free Church of Scotland leader, and he became a minister in 1873. John Buchan preached in Perth, in Parthead, and in Glasgow. His daughter Anna, who was an author in her own right, writing under the nom de plume of O. Douglas, was believed to be one of his best disciples. She wrote that on dark, wintry nights, her father would lift his audience up to the seventh heaven with his addresses. She said that he was a constant friend to the poor, the lonely, and the afflicted. And she also observed that having little, he possessed all things, being poor, yet he made many rich. Clearly, he was in all respects a good Christian pastor, and when he died, his children appreciated all that he had done for them as a committed Christian and as an enthusiastic patriot with a thirst for learning. One of his sons was the author John Buchan, whose best-known work, you will remember, was the iconic spy thriller, The 39 Steps. He also wrote poetry, and he loved the Scottish Islands. One of his poems, The Blessed Isles, reflects his spiritual attachment to them. May I read to you the last verse? So I'll launch my boat on the seas and sail on the shadowy deep past the island of apple trees and the little island of sheep, and follow St. Brandon's way far into the golden west till I harbour at the close of day in the Isles of the Blessed. Earlier I mentioned the story of the Reverend John Buchan because our family is proud of him and his devoted wife, Helen Masterton. My 4 sons are his great-great-grandsons, and one of them, Harry, during his gap year before university, applied to the Scottish Church's World Exchange so that he could go and work for the Church of North India in the city of Nagpur. The volunteers selected helped the church with its community projects in the running of hospitals, health clinics, and skill centres for young people. Being brought up in a Scottish manse can be an absolutely invaluable educational experience. And I believe that J.B., the author, as he is called in the family, benefited from the work ethic and steadfastness of purpose imparted to him by his father and mother. In 1930, John Buchan and George Adam Smith were the authors of a book called The Kirk in Scotland, and pages 78 and 79 contain these words about the aftermath of the disruption of 1843. And I quote, "The new Free Church must remain to all time a model of bold and provident organization. This greatest of Scottish secessions was a masterpiece of constructive genius. From the start, it undertook all the duties of a national communion. In its first year, it built 500 churches. It founded and carried on schools and religious ordinances in every part of the land. Indeed, nobody can doubt the courage, conviction, and passionately held principles of the Free Church ministers during the disruption. It may interest you to know that the oldest minister to leave the established Church of Scotland was the minister at Cramond, the Reverend George Muirhead, and his signature after the office bearers appears first on the deed of demission. He established Cramond Free Church in 1843 in the area in which I had the honor to represent as an MP for 23 years. As I mentioned, he established the Cramond Free Church in 1843 and was laid to rest in Cramond Kirkyard as the present Cramond Kirk Minister and Chaplain to the Lord High Commissioner this year, the Reverend Dr. Russell Barr, can confirm. It is my strong conviction that one of the great strengths of the Free Church of Scotland, and this, in my humble opinion, it is no different from the Church of Scotland, in that it has the undoubted capacity to inspire people to great endeavor and to help them to lead a more fulfilling life. They are encouraged to aspire to and achieve more than they ever thought possible. One of the most moving photographs which I have ever seen was a picture of the Reverend John Buchan's wife Helen, who was by then a widow as he died in 1910. She was making a pilgrimage all on her own to visit the grave of her son Alistair, who had lost his life during the First World War. The scene could not have been more evocative. Amidst all the mud and rainwater was a seemingly endless vista of newly dug graves, each marked with a small cross, and this little old lady, in her black satin Sunday best, was walking slowly and painfully but purposefully towards the last resting place of her son. It brought home to me the terrible burden of distress borne by so very many mothers during the First World War. In the Sermon on the Mount, Jesus said, "Blessed are they that mourn, for they shall be comforted." And I'm sure Helen Buchan drew great solace from her faith in coping with her grievous loss. I realize that the Free Church has a historic following in the Northwest Highlands and Skye, in Rasay and in the Western Isles. When I was a Scottish Office Minister, my wife had the honour in 1996 to launch a new ship, Loch Brewster, which was to act as a ferry between Harris and North Uist. For my part, I had the pleasure on many occasions of visiting that great centre of educational excellence, Sabal Mor Osteg, the Gaelic College. As you will all know, this is the year of Her Majesty the Queen's Diamond Jubilee. All kinds of celebrations are planned in communities throughout the country, which I'm sure will help lift our spirits in this time of economic constraint. That distinguished constitutional expert, Walter Bagehot, wrote that the monarch has the right to be consulted, the right to encourage, and the right to warn. Her Majesty has carried out these functions in full measure since Sir Winston Churchill was at number 10 Downing Street, and she continues to afford us a splendid example of selfless public service and steadfast dedication to duty. Thank you very much indeed for allowing us to join you today, and I will be very glad to assure Her Majesty of your loyalty and affection for her, which has been so obvious in the warmth of the welcome which you have afforded to me as her representative and to my wife, moderator, and fathers and brethren. May God bless your deliberations. Thank you.